What they didn't know was that by 5 p.m. that same day, I'd be on the phone with my insurance agent, removing both of them as beneficiaries from my $2.3 million life insurance policy and my $850,000 accidental death coverage, all because they drove away and left me stranded at a CVS pharmacy while I was weak from chemotherapy and unable to get home. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal during my cancer battle and the insurance changes that would shock them to their core, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss stories like this one. Trust me, you're going to want to see what happens when family members abandon someone during their most vulnerable moment, especially when that someone controls more insurance money than they ever imagined. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm 73 years old, and this story begins 18 months ago when I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer and made what I thought was a wise decision to move closer to my son David and his family for support during my treatment. A decision that would teach me the hardest lesson of my life about the difference between being loved and being useful. But to understand how I ended up abandoned at a pharmacy while battling cancer before becoming the person who would control my family's financial future from beyond the grave, you need to know who I was before I let my maternal instincts override my better judgment about family dynamics. For 42 years, I was Margaret Chen, senior partner at Chen Williams & Associates, one of Chicago's most respected insurance and risk management consulting firms. I didn't just sell insurance policies. I designed comprehensive coverage strategies for high-net-worth individuals and major corporations. My expertise was in understanding how to protect assets, minimize risk, and structure policies that would provide maximum benefit for beneficiaries while maintaining control for policyholders. I started with nothing but an economics degree from Northwestern University and a $15,000 inheritance from my father when my husband Robert died of a heart attack at age 42, leaving me with a 5-year-old son David and an absolute determination to never be financially vulnerable again. My first major client was myself. I used my insurance knowledge to structure a comprehensive portfolio of life insurance, disability coverage, and investment vehicles that would protect David's future if anything happened to me, while building wealth that could support us through any crisis. What began as personal financial planning became a specialty consulting practice when other widows and single parents started asking for advice about protecting their families. Word spread through professional networks about the insurance consultant, who understood both the technical aspects of coverage and the emotional realities of family financial planning. My firm grew steadily through referrals from satisfied clients, estate planning attorneys, and financial advisors who trusted my expertise in complex insurance structures. By the time I was 50, Chen Williams & Associates was managing insurance portfolios worth over $500 million for clients across the Midwest. The first major policy that really changed my trajectory was a whole life insurance structure I designed for a tech entrepreneur in 1995. While other agents focused on term policies and basic coverage, I saw the potential for creating multi-layered insurance portfolios that provided living benefits, investment growth, and estate planning advantages. Simultaneously, I was right. That client's portfolio generated enough cash value to fund his next business venture, provided tax-free income during his semi-retirement, and ultimately delivered a $5 million death benefit to his family when he passed away 15 years later. My innovative approach to insurance structuring became my signature service. By my 55th birthday, I had developed proprietary methods for optimizing insurance portfolios that attracted clients from across the country. Corporate executives seeking sophisticated estate planning, professional athletes needing asset protection during high-earning years, entertainment industry figures requiring complex beneficiary structures for blended families. My consulting practice specialized in what I called dynamic insurance architecture, policies that could be modified, optimized, and restructured throughout a client's lifetime to respond to changing circumstances, family situations, and financial goals. But I didn't just manage other people's policies. I practiced what I preached, building my own insurance portfolio through decades of careful planning, premium optimization, and strategic policy structuring that most people never understand. The foundation of my personal financial security was a comprehensive life insurance portfolio that I had been building and optimizing for over 30 years. The centerpiece was a $2.3 million whole life policy that I had purchased when David was young, which had accumulated substantial cash value through decades of premium payments and compound growth. This wasn't just a death benefit. It was a sophisticated, financial instrument that provided tax-free access to cash value during my lifetime, guaranteed growth that outpaced inflation, and flexible premium payment options that allowed me to maximize contributions during high-earning years while reducing payments during periods when I wanted to access the accumulated value. The policy had grown to be worth approximately $1.8 million in cash value by my 70th birthday, meaning I could access nearly $2 million during my lifetime if needed, while still maintaining a $2.3 million death benefit for my beneficiaries. My second major policy was an $850,000 accidental death and dismemberment policy that provided double coverage for unexpected incidents. This policy was relatively inexpensive, but provided crucial protection against the kinds of sudden events that could devastate a family's finances: car accidents, falls, medical emergencies, or other incidents that could result in immediate death or permanent disability. The accidental death coverage was particularly important because it provided benefits that were separate from my health-related life insurance, meaning beneficiaries could potentially receive both payouts if circumstances warranted. For someone my age, this additional coverage provided peace of mind and substantial additional protection for family members. My third major policy was a $1.2 million term life insurance policy that I had maintained since David's childhood. This policy provided substantial coverage at relatively low cost and was specifically designed to support David through his middle-age years when he would likely have the highest financial obligations: mortgage payments, children's education costs, and career development expenses. The term policy was scheduled to remain in effect until I was 85, providing a 15-year window of additional coverage during the period when David would most likely need financial support for his own family's major expenses. Beyond these primary policies, I maintained several smaller specialized insurance products that served specific purposes. A $300,000 policy designated specifically for grandchildren's education expenses, with cash value that could be accessed for tuition payments if needed during my lifetime. A $200,000 charitable giving policy that would provide tax advantages during my lifetime while funding donations to medical research organizations after my death. I also carried a $500,000 long-term care insurance policy that would cover nursing, home expenses, in-home care, or other medical support services without depleting my other assets or insurance benefits. This policy was crucial for protecting my family from the devastating costs of extended medical care while ensuring that my other insurance benefits would remain intact for inheritance purposes. These weren't just insurance policies. They were carefully structured financial instruments that provided tax advantages, investment growth, and flexible access to cash value during my lifetime, while guaranteeing substantial death benefits for my beneficiaries. My Chicago townhouse was worth $1.8 million and was owned outright. A beautiful 3-story brownstone in Lincoln Park, with original hardwood floors, a renovated gourmet kitchen, and a rooftop garden that overlooked the city skyline. The property occupied a corner lot with additional parking and a private entrance that provided both security and convenience. The townhouse featured 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, a library with built-in bookcases, and a wine cellar that I had converted into a home office during my later career years. The master suite included a walk-in closet and spa-style bathroom with a soaking tub that overlooked the garden. The property had appreciated consistently over the 20 years. I had owned it, and the lack of mortgage payments had allowed me to maximize my insurance premium payments and investment contributions. The townhouse also generated occasional rental income when I traveled for extended periods, providing additional cash flow that I typically reinvested in insurance premiums or charitable contributions. I also owned a lake cottage in Wisconsin, a $400,000 property on Lake Geneva with 2 bedrooms, a private dock, and 100 feet of shoreline that had been my retreat during stressful periods of building my business. The cottage was fully paid for and had been a source of family memories during David's childhood and teenage years. The lake house featured a wraparound porch with views of the water, a stone fireplace, and a boathouse that contained a vintage wooden speedboat that I had restored during my early retirement years. The property included mature oak trees, a private beach area, and a guest cottage that could accommodate visitors during summer gatherings. My investment portfolio was conservatively managed but substantial, worth approximately $1.8 million, and structured to provide steady income while preserving principal. The portfolio was diversified across multiple asset classes: blue-chip dividend stocks that provided quarterly income, municipal bonds from stable municipalities that offered tax-free interest, balanced mutual funds that provided exposure to growth markets while limiting risk, and a small commodities allocation that served as an inflation hedge. The investment portfolio generated approximately $7,000 monthly in passive income without touching the principal, providing comfortable living expenses that allowed me to maintain my lifestyle while continuing to pay insurance premiums and build additional wealth. Most importantly, my insurance expertise had allowed me to structure my policies in ways that provided maximum benefit and control. I understood policy riders, beneficiary designations, trust integration, and tax optimization strategies that most people never learn. I knew how to modify coverage based on changing life circumstances. I understood how to access cash value during emergencies without compromising death benefits. I was familiar with beneficiary designation strategies that could provide tax advantages and asset protection for heirs. I knew how to structure policies to avoid probate, minimize estate taxes, and provide flexible distribution options for beneficiaries. I understood the legal requirements for modifying policies and the timeframes required for changes to take effect. Most crucially, I understood exactly how to use insurance policies as both protection and leverage. I knew that beneficiary designations could be changed at any time, that policy ownership could be transferred or modified, and that the person who controls insurance policies holds significant power over other people's financial futures. What David and Karen would eventually discover was that a woman who had spent 42 years structuring insurance policies wasn't someone whose beneficiary designations could be taken for granted, especially when family members proved they couldn't be trusted to provide basic care and support during medical crises. David had always been what teachers politely called academically gifted but emotionally selective. As a child, he was brilliant and charming, but struggled with empathy and follow-through on commitments that required sustained effort or personal sacrifice for others. In elementary school, he excelled at subjects that came easily to him: mathematics, science, reading, but would lose interest in activities that required practice, patience, or helping others. He was the kid who could solve complex problems, but wouldn't help classmates who were struggling, who could master new concepts quickly, but wouldn't spend time reviewing material with students who needed assistance. His teachers often commented that David had tremendous potential, but seemed to lack the emotional intelligence and caring attitude that would make him truly successful in life. David is extremely bright, his third-grade teacher wrote in a conference report, but he seems to have difficulty understanding or responding to other people's needs and feelings. In middle school, this pattern intensified around family responsibilities and peer relationships. David would enthusiastically participate in activities that enhanced his status or provided personal benefits: academic competitions, leadership roles, science fairs, but would find excuses to avoid family obligations, household chores, or activities that required him to consider other people's needs. When I was working long hours to build my consulting practice during David's middle school years, he was notably unhelpful with household responsibilities or emotional support. While other children his age were learning to contribute to family functioning through chores, babysitting younger siblings, or helping with family businesses, David was focused entirely on his own interests and achievements. David just has different priorities right now, I would tell myself when he avoided helping with household tasks or showed little interest in spending time with extended family members. He'll develop more empathy and responsibility as he matures. In high school, David's pattern of selective caring became more pronounced around family relationships and community service. He would excel in academic areas that provided college application benefits, but would consistently avoid volunteer work, family caregiving situations, or activities that required sustained commitment to helping others. When my mother, David's grandmother, began experiencing health problems during his sophomore year, David was notably absent from family visits, caregiving responsibilities, and emotional support activities. He was always too busy with academic commitments, extracurricular activities, or social plans to spend time with his grandmother or help with practical care needs. David's just focused on his future right now, I would tell my mother when she asked why her grandson visited so rarely. College preparation is very demanding, and he'll have more time for family when he's older. But the pattern continued through his senior year, when my mother's health declined significantly and she needed more intensive family support. David remained focused on his own goals and activities, treating family medical situations as inconvenient interruptions rather than opportunities to provide care and support. When my mother died during David's senior year of high school, his response was notably detached and practical rather than emotional or supportive. He was more concerned about how her death might affect his college plans than about providing comfort to family members or participating in funeral arrangements. David grieves differently than other people, I rationalized. Some people show their emotions privately rather than openly. I funded David's education at Northwestern University, where he earned a degree in business administration with a focus on marketing. He was a solid student who graduated with good grades and strong professional prospects, but his college years were marked by the same pattern of prioritizing his own interests over family connections. During my mother's extended illness and eventual death, David was notably absent from family support activities. Even during college breaks when he was living at home, he would find academic projects, internship applications, or social commitments that prevented him from helping with caregiving, medical appointments, or emotional support for family members. College is a crucial time for building his career foundation, I would explain to relatives who questioned David's absence during family medical crises. He'll have plenty of time to focus on family when he's established professionally. After graduation, David moved to Phoenix and built a successful career in pharmaceutical sales, earning approximately $85,000 annually, plus bonuses that brought his total compensation to around $110,000 in good years. He was competent at his job and well regarded by clients and colleagues, but his professional success was built on charm and intelligence rather than on genuine care for others. David's choice to move across the country immediately after college, rather than staying closer to family during my later career years, was presented as a career opportunity rather than as distance-seeking behavior. Phoenix has a growing pharmaceutical industry, he would explain. This position will provide much better advancement opportunities than staying in Chicago. But the practical effect was that David established a life that was geographically and emotionally removed from family obligations and expectations. He visited Chicago 2 or 3 times per year, usually during holidays or special occasions, but maintained minimal regular contact and showed little interest in my daily life or ongoing needs. When David met Karen at age 28, I was hopeful that marriage might encourage him to develop stronger connections to family and greater willingness to provide support during difficult times. Karen was 26, had graduated from Arizona State University with a nursing degree, and had been working at Phoenix Children's Hospital for 4 years. She seemed caring, practical, and committed to helping others. Karen came from a middle-class family in Tucson, where family caregiving was prioritized and expected. Her father was a retired high school teacher who had cared for his elderly parents during their final years. Her mother was a school nurse who had balanced professional responsibilities with extensive family caregiving obligations. Karen had grown up understanding that family members support each other through medical crises and that personal convenience comes second to family needs. Karen's nursing background was particularly appealing to me as I entered my 70s and began to consider future health challenges. Having a daughter-in-law with medical training seemed like a tremendous advantage for our family, especially given my growing awareness that aging would eventually bring health issues that would require family support. During their engagement, Karen seemed to have a positive influence on David's approach to family relationships. She encouraged him to call me more regularly, remember important dates, and participate in family gatherings when they visited Chicago. She suggested thoughtful gifts and helped David write more personal letters and cards for birthdays and holidays. Karen also shared stories about her own family's approach to caregiving and seemed to understand the importance of supporting older family members through health challenges. "My grandmother lived with us during her final years," she would tell me. "It was challenging sometimes, but we couldn't imagine letting her face medical problems alone." I was impressed by Karen's apparent commitment to family caregiving and hopeful that marriage would help David develop more consistent patterns of caring for others and maintaining family connections. I was also grateful that someone with medical training would be part of our family, providing both professional expertise and personal understanding of health challenges. I paid for their wedding, a $28,000 celebration at a resort in Scottsdale that Karen had dreamed of since childhood. The venue was elegant and intimate, with views of the desert mountains and southwestern decor that reflected Karen's personal style. We had 120 guests, including my business associates, longtime family friends, and Karen's extended family from Arizona. The reception featured a 5-course dinner prepared by the resort's executive chef, open bar with premium wines and cocktails, live music from an acoustic duo, and floral arrangements that transformed the ballroom into something worthy of a magazine spread. Karen's dress was a designer gown from a boutique in Scottsdale, and David wore a custom tuxedo that made him look successful and sophisticated. The wedding photography captured beautiful moments of family celebration, and I was moved by Karen's apparent joy at joining our family. During her wedding speech, she spoke about looking forward to building strong relationships with David's family and being there for each other through all of life's challenges. I was happy to fund their dream wedding because I could easily afford it, because I wanted to welcome Karen into our family with generosity and celebration, and because I hoped this investment in their happiness would contribute to a strong marriage that would benefit both of them and strengthen our family connections. When they started looking for their first house 2 years later, I provided the $35,000 down payment as a wedding gift. The house was a beautiful 4-bedroom ranch in Ahwatukee, a family-friendly suburb with excellent schools and a strong sense of community. The property featured a swimming pool, desert landscaping, and mountain views that provided a peaceful setting for building their family life. The mortgage payments were manageable on their combined income, and the house provided space for the family they were planning to start, with room for children, guests, and the kind of family gatherings that I hoped would become regular traditions. Karen was earning $68,000 annually as a pediatric nurse at Phoenix Children's Hospital, and David was earning approximately $95,000 annually in pharmaceutical sales. Together, their $163,000 household income was more than sufficient to support their mortgage, living expenses, and comfortable lifestyle, especially with the boost my down payment gift had provided. For the first few years of their marriage, this arrangement seemed to work well for everyone. David was more attentive to family relationships when he had Karen's encouragement and reminders. He called more regularly, sent more thoughtful gifts, and seemed generally more engaged with family connections. Karen managed their household efficiently and seemed to be building the stable family life she had always wanted. She sent regular updates about their activities, shared photos of their home improvements, and made an effort to include me in their major decisions and celebrations. I enjoyed being a generous mother-in-law who could provide opportunities and security that enhanced their quality of life. The house down payment had allowed them to purchase a nicer home in a better neighborhood than they could have afforded independently, and I was happy to contribute to their stability and success. I thought I was witnessing David's maturation into a more caring and responsible family member, guided by Karen's positive influence and supported by the financial security that my gifts had provided. I believed that our family relationships were strengthening and that I was building a foundation of mutual support that would benefit everyone as we grew older. What I was actually witnessing was the calm before a storm of medical crisis that would reveal David and Karen's true priorities and their real attitudes toward family caregiving responsibilities when supporting me became inconvenient rather than beneficial. When doctors discovered my cancer during a routine mammogram in March 2023, my first instinct was to handle everything independently, just as I had managed every other crisis in my life for the past 30 years. But at 72 years old, facing the reality of chemotherapy, radiation, and months of treatment, I realized that this was different from any challenge I had previously encountered. The oncologist, Dr. Sarah Martinez at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, was direct but compassionate in explaining my diagnosis and treatment options. "Margaret, you have stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma. The good news is that it's very treatable, especially when caught at this stage. The challenging news is that treatment will require significant lifestyle adjustments and family support systems." "What kind of lifestyle adjustments?" I asked, immediately thinking about my work commitments and travel plans. "Chemotherapy will affect your energy levels, immune system, and ability to drive safely on treatment days. Radiation treatments require daily appointments for several weeks. You'll need someone to accompany you to major appointments, help with transportation after chemotherapy sessions, and provide support during periods when you're not feeling well." The word support hung in the air as I considered my options. I had built my entire adult life around independence and self-reliance. The idea of needing help with basic activities was both frightening and unfamiliar. "Do you have family members who can assist with your care?" Dr. Martinez asked gently. "I have a son in Phoenix," I replied. "He's married to a nurse, actually." "That's wonderful." Having family with medical training can be incredibly valuable during cancer treatment. Many patients find it helpful to move closer to family temporarily during the most intensive treatment phases. That conversation planted the seed of what would become the most costly decision of my life, both financially and emotionally. Over the following weeks, as I researched treatment options and considered my support systems, the idea of temporarily relocating to Phoenix began to seem increasingly practical. David and Karen had a large house with a guest suite. Karen's nursing background would provide medical expertise and support. Phoenix had excellent oncology facilities. And most importantly, I would have family nearby during what promised to be the most challenging period of my life. When I called David to discuss my diagnosis and potential treatment plans, his initial response seemed caring and supportive. "Mom, I'm so sorry to hear about the cancer, but I'm glad they caught it early," he said with what sounded like genuine concern. "What can Karen and I do to help?" "Well, I've been thinking about treatment logistics," I explained. "The oncologist mentioned that family support is really important during chemotherapy, especially for transportation and recovery assistance. Of course, we want to help however we can. I was wondering if it might make sense for me to spend the treatment period in Phoenix closer to you and Karen. I know it's a big ask, but..." "Mom, that's not a big ask at all," David interrupted. "That's what family is for. Karen and I have been talking about how we could help, and having you stay with us would be perfect. Karen's medical background would be really valuable, and we have plenty of space." The enthusiasm in his voice was reassuring and seemed to confirm that I was making the right decision. When I spoke with Karen separately, her response was even more encouraging. "Margaret, I think staying with us during treatment is a wonderful idea," she said warmly. "As a nurse, I know how important family support is during cancer treatment. I've seen patients struggle when they try to manage everything alone, and I've seen how much difference it makes when families pull together. I don't want to impose on your lives," I said. "I know you both have demanding careers and your own responsibilities. You're not imposing at all. Honestly, I've been worried about you managing cancer treatment alone in Chicago. Having you here where we can help with appointments, recovery, and daily needs just makes sense." Karen's nursing expertise and apparent eagerness to help seemed to validate my decision to relocate for treatment. Over the following months, we developed a plan for my temporary move to Phoenix. I would maintain my Chicago townhouse but spend 6 to 8 months in Arizona during the most intensive treatment phases. David and Karen would help with transportation to medical appointments, provide support during recovery periods, and assist with daily activities when I wasn't feeling well. I arranged for a long-term rental in Chicago, allowing a young professional couple to live in my townhouse while covering maintenance and security costs. I shipped some personal belongings to Phoenix and arranged for extended mail forwarding. I also researched oncology practices in Phoenix and arranged for my medical records to be transferred to a new treatment team. Dr. Martinez provided referrals to excellent oncologists in Phoenix and assured me that my treatment plan could be seamlessly continued there. "You're making a smart decision," she told me during our final consultation. "Having family support, especially with medical training, will make your treatment experience much more manageable." The move to Phoenix in May 2023 initially seemed to validate everyone's optimism about family support during medical treatment. David and Karen had prepared the guest suite in their house with thoughtful touches: fresh flowers, comfortable bedding, a small refrigerator stocked with gentle foods, and easy access to a bathroom and sitting area. "We want you to feel completely at home here," Karen said as she showed me around the space. "I've set up this area as a recovery zone where you can rest comfortably after treatments." The guest suite was indeed comfortable and private, with its own entrance and sitting area that provided independence while keeping me close to family support. David had installed handrails in the bathroom and shower area, and Karen had arranged medical supplies and comfort items that reflected her professional understanding of cancer treatment needs. My new oncologist in Phoenix, Dr. Robert Kim at Banner, MD Anderson Cancer Center, reviewed my case and confirmed the treatment plan that had been developed in Chicago. "Your cancer is very treatable," he assured me. "The chemotherapy regimen we're using has excellent success rates for your specific type and stage of cancer." "What should I expect in terms of side effects and recovery?" "Most patients experience fatigue, nausea, and immune system suppression. You'll need to avoid crowds and people who are sick. Transportation to and from treatment appointments is important because chemotherapy can affect your concentration and reaction time. Having family support will be crucial." David and Karen attended. That first consultation with me and their questions and engagement seemed to demonstrate genuine commitment to supporting my treatment. "How can we best help during recovery periods?" Karen asked, using her medical background to ask informed questions about care protocols. "What symptoms should we watch for that might indicate complications?" David added, taking notes on Dr. Kim's responses. Their apparent dedication to understanding my treatment needs and providing appropriate support reinforced my confidence in the decision to relocate for cancer treatment. The first few chemotherapy sessions seemed to confirm that family support was indeed valuable during cancer treatment. Karen would drive me to appointments and stay during treatments, using her medical knowledge to ask relevant questions and understand treatment protocols. David would rearrange his work schedule to be available during my recovery periods, helping with household tasks and providing company during difficult days. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" David would ask during my recovery periods. checking on my comfort and needs. "Is there anything specific you need? Food, medication, company, or just rest?" Karen would add, using her nursing assessment skills to monitor my condition and provide appropriate support. During those early weeks, I felt grateful for their support and vindicated in my decision to move closer to family during treatment. The combination of Karen's medical expertise and David's practical assistance seemed to provide exactly the kind of support system that Dr. Martinez had recommended. But what I didn't recognize at the time was that David and Karen's initial enthusiasm for supporting my cancer treatment was based on several assumptions about my situation that would prove to be both wrong and dangerous. Their first assumption was that my cancer treatment would be relatively brief and minimally disruptive to their normal routines. They had expected that chemotherapy would involve a few months of occasional appointments and short recovery periods, rather than the extended, intensive process that cancer treatment actually requires. Their second assumption was that my presence in their house would be temporary and wouldn't require significant long-term adjustments to their lifestyle, social activities, or personal plans. Their third assumption was that supporting my cancer treatment would primarily involve occasional transportation and minimal daily assistance, rather than the comprehensive caregiving that cancer patients actually need during treatment periods. Most significantly, their fourth assumption was that I would be grateful enough for their support to become more generous with financial gifts and ultimately more favorable in my estate planning and insurance beneficiary designations. This last assumption would prove to be the most revealing about their true motivations for encouraging my relocation to Phoenix. 3 months into my treatment, after the initial novelty and attention of my cancer diagnosis had worn off, David and Karen's approach to supporting my care began to change in subtle but concerning ways. The first sign of shifting priorities was David's increasing reluctance to adjust his work schedule for my medical appointments. "Mom, I have a really important client meeting that afternoon," he would say when I asked about transportation to chemotherapy sessions. "Can we schedule your appointment for a different day when I'm more available?" When I explained that oncology appointments aren't easily rescheduled and that chemotherapy timing is medically important, David's response revealed his misunderstanding of cancer treatment requirements. "But it's just one appointment. Surely they can move it to a day that works better for everyone's schedule." Karen's initial enthusiasm for attending appointments and providing medical support also began to wane as the reality of ongoing cancer treatment became apparent. "Margaret, I think you're comfortable enough with the treatment routine now that you probably don't need me to come to every appointment," she said after my 6th chemotherapy session. "I have some scheduling conflicts at the hospital and you seem to be managing the treatments really well independently." When I pointed out that Dr. Kim had specifically recommended having family support during treatments, especially for transportation afterward, Karen's response was dismissive. "You're much stronger than most cancer patients I've worked with. I think you can handle the treatments without constant supervision." The subtext was clear. Providing cancer support was becoming inconvenient for their personal and professional schedules, and they were looking for ways to reduce their caregiving responsibilities. The second sign of changing priorities was their increasing resentment of the lifestyle adjustments required to accommodate my medical needs. My compromised immune system during chemotherapy meant that I needed to avoid crowded places, people, with illnesses and social gatherings that might expose me to infections. This medical requirement began to conflict with David and Karen's social activities and entertainment preferences. "Mom, we had to cancel our dinner party this weekend because you can't be around groups of people," David complained after I reminded them about my infection risk. "It's getting difficult to maintain our social relationships when we have to constantly consider your medical restrictions. And we can't go to Jake and Maria's wedding next month because you shouldn't be in crowded spaces," Karen added with obvious frustration. "We're missing important events because of your treatment requirements." Their resentment of medical restrictions that were protecting my health during cancer treatment revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of caregiving responsibilities and priorities. When I suggested that they could attend social events without me or arrange for temporary alternative care during special occasions, their response was telling. But Mom, we can't just leave you alone when you're going through cancer treatment, David said with manufactured concern. What if something happened while we were gone? We feel responsible for your safety and well-being while you're staying with us, Karen added. We couldn't enjoy ourselves knowing you were here alone with medical needs. They were using their self-imposed caregiving responsibilities as justification for resentment, rather than understanding that family support could be flexible and didn't require constant supervision. The third sign of shifting priorities was their growing frustration with the financial costs associated with my cancer treatment and recovery needs. While my insurance covered the major medical expenses, there were numerous smaller costs associated with cancer treatment that added up quickly. Specialized foods for nausea management, supplements recommended by the oncology team, comfort items for recovery periods, transportation costs for frequent medical appointments, and household adjustments to accommodate my medical needs. Mom, these grocery bills are getting really expensive, Karen mentioned after a shopping trip that included organic foods and specialized nutrition products that my treatment team had recommended. Some of these supplements and special foods cost more than our normal weekly groceries. And the gas costs for all these medical appointments are adding up, David added. We're driving to the cancer center 3 times a week, plus pharmacy trips and other medical errands. When I offered to reimburse them for expenses related to my care, their response revealed underlying expectations about financial benefits they had anticipated from supporting my treatment. It's not just about the money, Mom, David said carefully. It's about the overall impact on our budget and lifestyle. We hadn't really calculated how expensive it would be to have someone with medical needs living with us. And honestly, Karen added, we thought that having you stay with us might actually provide some financial benefits for our family, rather than just creating additional expenses. The implication was clear. They had expected that my gratitude for their cancer support would translate into increased financial generosity, rather than understanding that cancer patients require support without expectation of financial return, David and Karen's enthusiasm for providing cancer support began to wane. They started developing strategies to reduce their caregiving responsibilities while maintaining the appearance of family dedication. The first strategy was delegating my care needs to external services rather than providing personal family support. Mom, we've been thinking that you might benefit from professional home health services, Karen suggested after I mentioned needing help with household tasks during recovery periods. There are agencies that specialize in cancer patient support, and they might be more qualified to help with your medical needs. And maybe we should arrange transportation services for your medical appointments, David added. There are medical transport companies that understand cancer treatment requirements better than we do. When I pointed out that family support was different from professional services and that I had specifically moved to Phoenix to be closer to family during treatment, their response was manipulative. But Mom, we want you to have the best possible care, Karen said with false concern. Professional services might actually be better for your health and recovery than relying on family members who don't have specialized training. And this way, you wouldn't have to worry about imposing on our schedules or feeling guilty when we have conflicts with your medical needs, David added, reframing their desire to avoid caregiving as concern for my emotional well-being. The second strategy was minimizing the severity of my treatment side effects and recovery needs. You're handling chemotherapy much better than most patients, Karen would observe when I mentioned feeling tired or unwell after treatments. I think you're stronger than you realize and probably don't need as much recovery time as you think. Mom, you seem to be bouncing back from treatments pretty quickly, David would add. Maybe you don't need as much support and assistance as we initially thought. These comments were designed to reduce their caregiving obligations by suggesting that my medical needs were less significant than I was representing. The third strategy was gradually increasing expectations for my independence and self-sufficiency during treatment. Margaret, I think it would be good for you to start doing more activities independently, Karen suggested. Maintaining normal routines and responsibilities is important for cancer patients' emotional health. And Mom, maybe you could handle some of the household contributions that would help us manage the extra expenses of having you stay here, David added, introducing the idea that I should be contributing to household labor rather than receiving care during cancer treatment. These strategies revealed that David and Karen were trying to convert my cancer treatment period from a caregiving situation into a situation where I was providing benefits to their household while requiring minimal support from them. By the 4th month of my treatment, the gap between my expectations for family support and David and Karen's willingness to provide that support had become significant and concerning. The daily reality of cancer treatment, fatigue, nausea, immune system suppression, frequent medical appointments, and emotional challenges required more consistent family support than they were willing or able to provide. But more troubling was their apparent belief that my gratitude for their limited support should translate into increased financial generosity and preferential treatment in my estate planning. Mom, we've been thinking about the financial planning conversations we had before your diagnosis, David mentioned during one of our weekly family dinners. Maybe this would be a good time to revisit some of those insurance and estate planning decisions. What do you mean? I asked, confused about the connection between my cancer treatment and financial planning. Well, you're getting older, and having cancer makes people think about mortality and legacy planning, Karen explained carefully. Maybe it would be wise to make sure your affairs are in order, and your insurance beneficiaries reflect your current family relationships. And honestly, Mom, David added, taking care of someone during cancer treatment really demonstrates family commitment and dedication. It might be appropriate to recognize that commitment in your financial planning. The implication was that their limited cancer support should be rewarded with preferential treatment in my insurance policies and estate planning, rather than understanding that family support during medical crises is a normal expression of love and caring. When I didn't immediately respond to their hints about insurance beneficiaries and financial recognition, they began to escalate their suggestions more directly. Margaret, you know that David and I have been discussing our long-term financial goals, Karen said during a conversation about household expenses. We're hoping to upgrade to a larger house in the next few years, and we've been wondering if you might consider helping with the down payment as a gift or early inheritance. And Mom, we've been thinking about the kids' college planning, David added, referring to the children they were hoping to have in the future. It would be really helpful to know what kind of educational support we can expect from family resources. These conversations revealed that they viewed my cancer diagnosis and their caregiving support as opportunities to accelerate their access to my wealth, rather than understanding that cancer treatment was a temporary medical situation that required family support without financial expectations. Most concerning was their apparent belief that my cancer diagnosis made me more vulnerable to pressure for financial decisions and more likely to agree to arrangements that would benefit them at my expense. Cancer really makes people think about what's important in life, Karen would observe. Family relationships and making sure your loved ones are taken care of become the top priorities. And Mom, you're in a position to really make a difference. For our family's future, David would add. The financial security you could provide would change our entire trajectory and allow us to build the kind of life we've always dreamed of. They were using my cancer diagnosis and medical vulnerability as leverage for financial manipulation, rather than understanding that serious illness requires family support without conditions or expectations for financial return. As my chemotherapy treatments continued through the summer and into early fall, the disconnect between my needs for cancer support and David and Karen's expectations for financial benefits became increasingly apparent and troubling. I was learning that cancer treatment requires sustained, consistent family support that prioritizes the patient's medical needs over other considerations. But David and Karen were learning that caregiving was more demanding and less immediately rewarding than they had anticipated. More importantly, I was beginning to recognize that their enthusiasm for supporting my cancer treatment had been based on assumptions about financial benefits rather than genuine caring about my health and well-being. The stage was being set for the confrontation that would ultimately reveal their true priorities and lead to the insurance policy changes that would shock them more than they could possibly imagine. But first, they would need to demonstrate exactly how far their selfishness would extend when their minimal caregiving obligations conflicted with their personal convenience and social preferences. That demonstration was coming sooner than any of us realized, and it would involve a level of abandonment and betrayal that would forever change my understanding of our family relationships and my decisions about who deserved to benefit from my life insurance policies. By October 2023, 6 months into my cancer treatment, David and Karen's approach to my care had evolved from enthusiastic family support to what I now recognize as systematic exploitation disguised as caregiving. What had begun as genuine offers to help during my medical crisis had transformed into calculated strategies to maximize their personal benefits while minimizing their actual responsibilities. The transformation was gradual enough that I initially attributed their changing behavior to caregiver fatigue rather than recognizing it as the deliberate manipulation that it actually was. The first major escalation in their expectations occurred when David approached me about what he called family, financial optimization during medical crisis. Mom, Karen and I have been researching how families typically handle financial planning during serious illness, David began during one of our evening conversations. We've learned that there are strategies that can benefit everyone while ensuring that medical expenses don't create unnecessary financial stress. He had prepared materials, printed articles about family financial planning during illness, information about medical expense tax deductions, and documentation about healthcare proxy arrangements that seemed professionally researched and thoughtfully considered. What we've discovered, Karen added, joining the conversation with a folder of documents, is that when someone is dealing with cancer treatment, it often makes sense to consolidate certain financial responsibilities with family members who can provide oversight and assistance. The conversation was carefully framed as being for my benefit, designed to reduce my stress and ensure proper management of my affairs during medical treatment. But buried in their proposals were several arrangements that would have transferred significant control over my financial resources to their management and oversight. For instance, David continued, we could set up a joint checking account for medical expenses that would allow us to handle payments for treatments, medications, and related costs without you having to manage those details during chemotherapy. And we could arrange for automatic payments for your regular bills, the Chicago townhouse expenses, insurance premiums, and investment account management, so you don't have to worry about those responsibilities while you're focusing on getting better, Karen added. We're also thinking it might be wise to establish healthcare proxy arrangements that would allow us to make medical decisions if you're ever incapacitated by treatment side effects, David suggested. The proposals seemed reasonable on the surface and were presented as temporary assistance during my medical crisis, but they would have given David and Karen access to my bank accounts, control over my bill payments, and legal authority to make medical decisions that could affect my treatment and recovery. We're not asking for permanent changes, Karen was careful to emphasize. We're just suggesting temporary arrangements that would help us support you more effectively during this challenging time. And honestly, Mom, David added, having cancer really highlights how important it is to have proper financial and medical safeguards in place. These arrangements would protect you and give us the tools we need to help you. When I expressed hesitation about transferring financial and medical authority during my illness, their response revealed underlying assumptions about my decision-making capacity during cancer treatment. Margaret, cancer treatment is incredibly stressful and can affect cognitive function temporarily, Karen said with false medical authority. Many patients find it helpful to have family members handle financial and administrative responsibilities so they can focus entirely on healing. And Mom, you're dealing with chemotherapy drugs that can cause confusion and memory problems, David added. It would be much safer to have backup systems in place rather than trying to manage everything yourself when you're not feeling well. They were using my cancer diagnosis to suggest that I was becoming incapable of managing my own affairs, rather than understanding that cancer patients remain competent adults who retain the right to control their own financial and medical decisions. When I declined to implement their financial management proposals, explaining that I preferred to maintain control over my accounts and decisions, their disappointment was obvious and concerning. "Mom, we're just trying to help," David said with frustration that seemed disproportionate to my refusal of assistance I hadn't requested. "We can't provide proper support if you won't let us access the tools and information we need. And honestly, Margaret," Karen added, "it's going to be very difficult for us to continue providing care if we don't have the authority to handle emergencies or make decisions when you're not able to do so yourself." The implied threat was clear. Their continued support for my cancer treatment was conditional on my willingness to transfer financial and medical authority to them. As my resistance to their financial control proposals became apparent, David and Karen shifted their strategy to what they called practical cost-sharing arrangements for extended family care. "Mom, we need to have an honest conversation about the financial impact of your extended stay with us," David began during a family meeting that felt more like a business negotiation than a medical support discussion. "We've calculated the additional household expenses related to your cancer treatment support," Karen added, presenting a spreadsheet that detailed costs I had never agreed to or requested. "The increased utility bills, grocery expenses, transportation costs, and household wear and tear are significantly impacting our budget." The spreadsheet was impressive in its detail and concerning in its implications. They had calculated costs for my use of their guest suite, including a monthly rent equivalent that was based on local rental market rates. They had itemized my share of utility bills, including increased heating, cooling, and water usage. They had documented transportation costs for medical appointments, including not just gas expenses, but also vehicle depreciation and insurance allocations. "The total monthly cost of supporting your cancer treatment is approximately $2,800, David announced, presenting this figure as if it were an objective calculation rather than an arbitrary assessment of expenses they had chosen to attribute to my presence. "We're not asking you to pay all of these costs," Karen was quick to clarify. "We understand that you're family and that you didn't choose to have cancer, but we think it would be fair for you to contribute to some of the major expenses that your care is creating for our household." The cost-sharing arrangement they proposed would have required me to pay approximately $1,500 monthly for the privilege of receiving their limited cancer support, essentially converting their family caregiving into a paid service arrangement. "And, honestly, Mom," David continued, "this cost-sharing approach would actually be good for your independence and self-respect. You wouldn't have to feel like you're imposing on us, and we wouldn't have to worry about the financial burden of providing your care." They were reframing their demand for payment as being for my emotional benefit, suggesting that paying them would make me feel better about receiving support during cancer treatment. When I pointed out that family caregiving during medical crises isn't typically a commercial transaction, and that I had never agreed to pay rent for staying in their guest room during chemotherapy, their response was manipulative and revealing. "But Mom, this isn't a normal family visit," Karen explained. "This is an extended medical care situation that's creating real costs and responsibilities for us. Most families don't have the resources to provide this level of support without some kind of cost-sharing arrangement. And honestly," David added, "you're in a position to afford these contributions much more easily than we can afford to absorb these additional expenses. It just makes sense for the person with more resources to cover the costs related to their own care needs." They were using my cancer diagnosis and their minimal caregiving efforts to justify extracting rent payments, while simultaneously suggesting that my wealth made it reasonable for me to pay them for support that families typically provide freely during medical crises. The most troubling aspect of their cost-sharing proposal was the way they had calculated expenses that seemed designed to maximize my financial contributions rather than accurately reflect actual costs related to my care. The rent calculation for my use of their guest suite was based on luxury apartment rates rather than the actual cost of providing guest accommodation to a family member. The utility allocations included expenses that wouldn't have changed regardless of my presence. The transportation costs included vehicle depreciation and insurance expenses that would have existed whether or not they drove me to medical appointments. We've tried to be fair in these calculations, Karen assured me. We're not trying to profit from your medical situation. We're just asking you to cover the real costs that your care is creating for our family. But the calculations revealed a systematic effort to monetize every aspect of my presence in their home and every minute of support they provided, rather than understanding that family caregiving involves shared costs and mutual support that isn't typically itemized and charged. When I expressed concern about their approach to treating family medical support as a commercial transaction, David's response revealed disturbing assumptions about my obligations during cancer treatment. Mom, you have to understand that providing cancer care is a major commitment that affects every aspect of our lives, he said defensively. We've rearranged our schedules, modified our lifestyle, and taken on additional responsibilities that we didn't anticipate when we agreed to help. And honestly, he continued, you're asking us to provide services that would cost thousands of dollars if you hired professional caregivers or stayed in an assisted living facility during treatment. The cost sharing we're proposing is actually much less expensive than the alternatives. David was comparing their limited family support to professional caregiving services, while simultaneously demanding payment for assistance that fell far short of what professional caregivers would actually provide. As David and Karen's financial demands escalated, they also began implementing what they called practical boundaries for sustainable family caregiving that systematically reduced their support responsibilities while maintaining their income from my cost-sharing payments. D. First boundary involved limiting their availability for medical appointment transportation. Margaret, we need to establish a regular schedule for medical transportation that works with our professional commitments, Karen announced. We can provide rides to appointments on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but you'll need to arrange alternative transportation for appointments on other days. And we can only accommodate appointments between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. on those days, David added. Early morning or late afternoon appointments conflict with our work responsibilities. When I pointed out that oncology appointments aren't scheduled based on family convenience and that chemotherapy timing is medically important, their response was dismissive. Mom, there are medical transport services that can handle appointments when we're not available, Karen said. You don't need family members for every single medical appointment. And honestly, David added, having some independence in managing your medical care would probably be good for your confidence and recovery. They were framing their reduced availability as being beneficial for my independence, rather than acknowledging that they were prioritizing their convenience over my medical support needs. The second boundary involved limiting their availability for recovery support after chemotherapy sessions. We've noticed that you seem to bounce back from treatments pretty quickly, Karen observed after my 8th chemotherapy session. I think you're ready to manage recovery periods more independently. What do you mean? I asked, confused by her assessment since I was still experiencing significant fatigue and nausea after each treatment. I mean, you don't need constant supervision during recovery, she explained. You can rest in the guest suite and call us if you need anything urgent. But we don't need to stay home from work every time you have treatment. And Mom, you're much stronger than most cancer patients, David added. I think you're capable of handling recovery days without requiring full-time family assistance. Their assessment of my recovery capabilities seemed designed to reduce their caregiving responsibilities rather than accurately reflect my medical needs during chemotherapy recovery. The third boundary involved limiting their emotional and social support during cancer treatment. Margaret, we think it would be beneficial for you to develop some social connections and support systems in Phoenix that don't depend entirely on family, Karen suggested. Maybe cancer support groups or community programs for seniors. "We're concerned that you're becoming too dependent on us for companionship and emotional support," David added. "It's not healthy for cancer patients to rely exclusively on family members for social interaction." When I pointed out that I had relocated to Phoenix specifically to be closer to family during treatment, and that building new social connections during cancer treatment wasn't realistic or appropriate, their response revealed their desire to reduce their emotional support obligations. "But Mom, you need to start building a life here that doesn't revolve around your medical treatment," David said. "Eventually, your cancer treatment will be finished, and you'll need other sources of social support and activities." "And honestly," Karen added, "it's emotionally exhausting for us to be your primary source of companionship while also managing all the practical aspects of your care. We need some boundaries to maintain our own well-being." They were using my cancer diagnosis to justify reducing their emotional support, while simultaneously charging me rent for staying in their home and expecting payment for their limited practical assistance. By November 2023, 7 months into my cancer treatment, David and Karen had successfully converted their family caregiving into a paid service arrangement that provided them with monthly income while minimizing their actual responsibilities and commitment. I was paying $1,500 monthly for the privilege of staying in their guest room during chemotherapy. I was arranging my own transportation to most medical appointments. I was managing my own recovery periods with minimal family support. I was seeking my own social connections and emotional support systems. But most troubling was their escalating pressure for access to my insurance policies and estate planning decisions, which they presented as natural extensions of their caregiving support. "Mom, we've been thinking about your insurance situation," David mentioned during one of our monthly family financial discussions. "Given that we're providing your primary care and support during this health crisis, it might be appropriate to review your beneficiary designations." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand where this conversation was heading. "Well, we're the ones who would be responsible for handling your affairs if something happened during your cancer treatment," Karen explained. "It would make sense for your insurance policies to reflect our current caregiving relationship and responsibilities." "And honestly, Mom," David added, "supporting someone through cancer treatment really demonstrates family commitment and dedication. That level of care and responsibility should probably be recognized in your insurance and estate planning." They were suggesting that their paid caregiving services should be rewarded with preferential treatment in my life insurance beneficiary designations, essentially converting their commercial support into leverage for inheritance benefits. When I didn't immediately respond to their suggestions about insurance beneficiaries, they escalated their pressure by introducing urgency and medical vulnerability into the conversation. "Margaret, having cancer really highlights how important it is to have your affairs in order," Karen said with manufactured concern. "Cancer can be unpredictable, and you want to make sure your insurance policies reflect your current wishes and family relationships. And Mom, if something unexpected happened during your treatment, you'd want to know that the people who had been caring for you would be protected and provided for," David added. "That's just responsible planning during serious illness." "We're not asking for anything unreasonable," Karen continued. "We're just suggesting that your insurance policies should reflect the reality of who's actually providing your care and support during this critical time." They were using my cancer diagnosis and medical vulnerability to pressure me into modifying my insurance policies in their favor, while framing their request as responsible planning rather than as exploitation of my medical situation. The most manipulative aspect of their insurance pressure campaign was the way they connected their caregiving support to my insurance decisions, implying that continued care was conditional on favorable insurance treatment. "We want to continue providing the best possible support during your treatment," David said carefully during one of these conversations. "But it's been challenging to maintain this level of care without knowing that our commitment and sacrifice is appreciated and recognized." "And honestly, Margaret," Karen added, "it's emotionally difficult to provide intensive caregiving when you feel like your efforts aren't valued or acknowledged. Having security about our family's future would make it easier for us to focus on supporting your recovery. They were threatening to reduce their already minimal caregiving support if I didn't agree to modify my insurance policies in their favor, using my medical vulnerability and dependence on their assistance as leverage for financial benefits. When I expressed concern about their approach to connecting caregiving support with insurance beneficiary expectations, their response revealed the transactional nature of their relationship with me during my cancer treatment. "Mom, we're not being transactional," David protested. "We're just being realistic about the fact that providing cancer care requires major sacrifices and commitments from family members. And people who make those kinds of sacrifices should have some security about their future," Karen added. "That's not unreasonable or selfish. That's just practical family planning. We've given up income opportunities, social activities, and personal time to provide your care," David continued. "The least you could do is ensure that our family's future is protected through your insurance planning." They were framing their minimal paid caregiving as major sacrifices that entitled them to insurance benefits, while ignoring the fact that I was paying them for services that families typically provide freely during medical crises. As the holidays approached in late 2023, David and Karen's pressure for insurance beneficiary changes intensified, and they began introducing additional financial demands that revealed the full extent of their exploitation of my cancer treatment situation. "Mom, we've been thinking about Christmas gifts this year," David mentioned during a conversation about holiday plans. "Given everything we've done to support your cancer treatment, we were hoping you might consider more substantial gifts that would help with some of our major financial goals." "What kind of financial goals?" I asked, though I was beginning to dread the answer. "Well, we've been wanting to upgrade to a larger house," Karen explained. "The guest suite arrangement has worked for your cancer treatment, but long-term we really need more space for our own family planning. And we've been thinking about starting a family," David added. "But the financial responsibilities of supporting your cancer care have made it difficult to save for the additional expenses that come with having children." They were suggesting that my Christmas gifts should include down payment assistance for a house upgrade and financial support for their future family planning, presenting these requests as consequences of their caregiving sacrifice rather than as separate personal financial goals. "We're not asking for anything unreasonable," Karen assured me. "Just some help with major life goals that we've had to postpone because of the time and resources we've devoted to supporting your treatment. And honestly, Mom," David added, "helping us achieve these goals would actually benefit you too. Larger house would provide better accommodation if you need extended care in the future, and having grandchildren would give you family connections and purpose during your recovery." They were framing their requests for house down payments and family planning support as being beneficial for my future care needs and emotional well-being, rather than acknowledging that they were using my cancer diagnosis to accelerate their access to my wealth. The Christmas gift conversation revealed the full scope of their expectations and the extent to which they viewed my cancer treatment as an opportunity to extract maximum financial benefits while providing minimal actual support. By December 2023, 8 months into my cancer treatment, I was paying David and Karen $1,500 monthly for housing during chemotherapy, arranging most of my own medical transportation, managing my own recovery periods, seeking my own social support, and being pressured to modify my insurance policies and provide substantial financial gifts in recognition of their caregiving sacrifice. The contrast between their limited support and their extensive financial expectations was becoming impossible to ignore, and I was beginning to understand that my cancer diagnosis had been viewed as an opportunity for financial gain rather than as a medical crisis requiring family support. But I was also beginning to realize that my cancer treatment was actually going well, that my prognosis was excellent, and that I would soon be healthy enough to make independent decisions about my living situation and family relationships without the vulnerability created by my medical needs. David and Karen, however, were operating under the assumption that, My gratitude for their minimal support and my medical vulnerability would continue indefinitely, providing them with ongoing leverage for financial benefits and insurance modifications. They were about to discover that cancer patients who recover their health also recover their power to make independent decisions about how they're treated by family members and who benefits from their insurance policies. The confrontation that would change everything was just 2 months away, and it would involve a level of abandonment during medical treatment that would forever alter my understanding of their character and my decisions about their future financial security. The conversation that would shatter my tolerance forever and reveal the true depths of David and Karen's selfishness happened on a Tuesday afternoon in February 2024, nearly 11 months into my cancer treatment. Phoenix was experiencing an unusual cold snap for the desert, with temperatures dropping to 45 degrees and a light drizzle that made driving conditions challenging for someone still recovering from chemotherapy effects. I had just completed what would turn out to be my final chemotherapy session, a milestone that should have been celebrated as a family victory over cancer. Instead, it became the setting for the most devastating betrayal I had ever experienced from people who claimed to love me. The day had started with what seemed like normal family dynamics around my medical care. David had agreed to drive me to my 10 a.m. chemotherapy appointment at Banner MD Anderson Cancer Center, and Karen had promised to pick up my post-treatment medications from the pharmacy afterward. "Mom, I'll drop you off at the cancer center and pick you up when treatment is finished," David had said that morning over breakfast. "Karen will meet us at the pharmacy to get your medications, and then we'll all go home so you can rest." The plan seemed straightforward and consistent with the minimal level of support they had been providing throughout my treatment. What I didn't realize was that this ordinary Tuesday would become the day when their mask of family caring would slip completely, revealing the calculation and cruelty that had been driving their behavior for months. The chemotherapy session itself went well. My oncology team was optimistic about my progress and recovery prospects. "Margaret, this is your final chemotherapy treatment," Dr. Kim announced with genuine satisfaction. "Your tumor markers are excellent, your scans show significant improvement, and you've responded beautifully to treatment." "What happens next?" I asked, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation about moving beyond the intensive treatment phase. "We'll continue monitoring with regular checkups, but you're essentially moving into the maintenance and recovery phase," he explained. "You should start feeling much stronger over the next few weeks, and you can begin planning for a return to normal activities." The news that my intensive cancer treatment was ending should have been cause for family celebration. Instead, it would prove to be the catalyst for David and Karen's most selfish and revealing behavior yet. When David picked me up from the cancer center that afternoon, his mood seemed subdued rather than celebratory, despite the excellent news about my treatment progress. "That's great news about finishing chemotherapy, Mom," he said with what sounded like forced enthusiasm. "I'm sure you're relieved to be done with treatments." "I am," I replied, though I was puzzled by his lukewarm response to what should have been wonderful news for our entire family. "Dr. Kim says I should start feeling much better soon, and I can begin thinking about returning to Chicago in a few months." David's reaction to my mention of returning to Chicago was swift and concerning. "Let's not make any hasty decisions about your living situation," he said quickly. "You might need continued support during recovery, and it would be premature to think about major changes right now." His response revealed that my potential return to independent living was not something he welcomed, despite the successful completion of my cancer treatment. When we arrived at the CVS pharmacy to meet Karen and pick up my post-treatment medications, the dynamic between David and Karen seemed tense and conspiratorial in ways that I couldn't initially understand. "How long will the prescription take to fill?" David asked the pharmacy technician with unusual impatience. "About 45 minutes for this particular medication," the technician replied. "It's a specialized anti-nausea prescription that requires additional preparation time." 45 minutes? Karen said with obvious frustration. We weren't expecting it to take that long. I was surprised by their reaction, since prescription wait times were a normal part of cancer treatment logistics that we had dealt with dozens of times over the past 11 months. I can wait, I said, settling into one of the pharmacy's waiting area chairs. I'm not in any hurry, and it's important to get the right medication for recovery. That's when David and Karen exchanged a look that I would later recognize as the moment they decided to abandon me in favor of their own convenience and social priorities. Actually, Mom, David said carefully, Karen and I just remembered that we have an important commitment this afternoon that we can't reschedule. What kind of commitment? I asked, confused since they hadn't mentioned any plans that conflicted with my post-chemotherapy care. It's a real estate showing, Karen explained quickly. We've been trying to see this house for weeks, and the seller finally agreed to a showing today. It's the house we've been hoping to buy with the down payment assistance we discussed. Can't you reschedule the house showing? I asked. This is my final chemotherapy medication pickup, and I'm still feeling weak from treatment. The seller is only available today, David said with what I now recognize as a fabricated urgency. And honestly, Mom, you can just wait here for the prescription and call an Uber to get home. You don't really need us for this. I was stunned by their suggestion that I should arrange my own transportation home after my final chemotherapy session, especially given that I was still experiencing fatigue and potential side effects that made driving inadvisable. David, I can't drive myself home after chemotherapy, I reminded him. Dr. Kim specifically said I shouldn't drive on treatment days because of the medication effects. But you can take an Uber, Karen said dismissively. It's not like you need family members for every little thing. You're stronger than you think. And honestly, Mom, David added, this house showing could be really important for our future. We've been waiting months for this opportunity, and supporting your cancer treatment has delayed our own life plans long enough. The callousness of their reasoning was breathtaking. They were prioritizing a house showing for a home they wanted to buy with money they expected me to provide, over supporting me after my final chemotherapy treatment. I understand the house showing is important, I said, trying to remain calm. But could one of you stay with me while the other goes to see the house? Or could we reschedule something to accommodate both priorities? Their response revealed the depth of their selfishness and the extent to which they had come to view my medical needs as inconvenient obligations rather than family priorities. Margaret, we both need to see the house together, Karen said with artificial patience. This is a major decision that affects our entire future, and we can't make it based on only one person's assessment. And Mom, David added, you're going to be fine waiting here for 45 minutes. The pharmacy is comfortable. You can rest in the waiting area, and you can easily get home on your own once the prescription is ready. We'll be back in an hour, Karen assured me, though her tone suggested this was a final decision rather than a plan open to discussion. Just sit tight and wait for your prescription. Before I could protest further or negotiate an alternative arrangement, they were walking toward the pharmacy exit, leaving me alone in the CVS waiting area after my final chemotherapy treatment. We'll see you at home later, David called over his shoulder as they disappeared through the sliding doors. I sat in that pharmacy chair, weak from chemotherapy and abandoned by the people who had been charging me $1,500 monthly for cancer support, watching through the window as they drove away to pursue their own priorities. The 45 minutes I spent waiting for my prescription in that CVS pharmacy became the most clarifying period of my entire cancer treatment experience. Sitting alone in the fluorescent-lit waiting area, surrounded by strangers picking up their medications, I had time to reflect on 11 months of systematic exploitation disguised as family caregiving. David and Karen had just demonstrated that, even on the day of my final chemotherapy treatment, a milestone that should have been celebrated as a family victory, their personal convenience and financial goals took priority over my medical support needs. But more importantly, their abandonment at the pharmacy crystallized a pattern of behavior that I had been rationalizing and excusing for months. They had converted my cancer treatment into a source of monthly income through their cost-sharing arrangements, while providing minimal actual support. They had pressured me to modify my insurance policies in their favor, using my medical vulnerability as leverage for financial benefits. They had demanded Christmas gifts that would fund their major life goals, presenting these requests as consequences of their caregiving sacrifice. Most significantly, they had demonstrated that their support for my cancer treatment had always been conditional and self-serving, rather than based on genuine care for my health and well-being. Sitting in that pharmacy, I realized that I had been viewing our relationship through the lens of family loyalty and maternal love, while they had been viewing it through the lens of financial opportunity and personal advantage. My cancer diagnosis hadn't brought us closer together as a family. It had revealed the transactional nature of their feelings toward me and their willingness to exploit my medical vulnerability for their own benefit. But I also realized something else during those 45 minutes. My cancer treatment was ending successfully. My health was returning, and I was no longer medically vulnerable in ways that made me dependent on their limited and conditional support. I was still Margaret Chen, senior partner at Chen Williams & Associates, with 42 years of experience in insurance and risk management. I was still the woman who controlled $2.3 million in life insurance policies, plus additional accidental death coverage and investment portfolios worth nearly $2 million. Most importantly, I was still the person who could modify insurance beneficiaries, change estate planning arrangements, and make decisions about who deserved to benefit from my assets and policies. David and Karen had been operating under the assumption that my gratitude for their minimal support and my medical vulnerability would provide them with ongoing leverage for financial benefits. They were about to discover exactly how wrong they were about both my gratitude and my vulnerability. When my prescription was finally ready, I took an Uber home to their house, a ride that cost $18 and gave me additional time to consider my options and plan my response to their abandonment. By the time I arrived at their house, David and Karen had returned from their house showing and were excitedly discussing the property they hoped to purchase with financial assistance they expected me to provide. "Mom, you should see this house," Karen said enthusiastically as I entered through the front door. "It's perfect for our needs, and it has a wonderful guest suite that would be ideal if you ever need family support again in the future." The down payment is $75,000, David added, clearly expecting this information to prompt an immediate offer of financial assistance. "But the seller is motivated, and we think we could close quickly if we can secure the funding." They were discussing their house purchase plans as if my participation in funding was assured, despite having abandoned me at a pharmacy an hour earlier to pursue their own priorities. "How was the prescription pickup?" Karen asked as an afterthought, clearly not concerned about my post-chemotherapy recovery or transportation challenges. "It was fine," I replied calmly. The prescription took exactly 45 minutes as predicted, and the Uber home was comfortable and convenient. "See?" David said with satisfaction. "You didn't need us for that after all. You're much more independent than you sometimes think." Their casual dismissal of their abandonment, combined with their immediate focus on securing funding for their house purchase, confirmed everything I had realized during my time alone at the pharmacy. That evening, while David and Karen continued planning their house purchase and discussing how my down payment assistance would make their dreams possible, I made a series of phone calls that would demonstrate exactly how expensive their abandonment at the pharmacy was about to become. Deepow. First call was to my insurance agent in Chicago, Robert Stevenson, who had been managing my policies for over 20 years. "Robert, I need to make some immediate changes to my life insurance beneficiary designations," I said, using the secure phone line in the guest suite where I had been staying. "Of course, Margaret. What changes would you like to make?" "I want to remove David Chen and Karen Chen as beneficiaries from all of my life insurance policies, effective immediately." There was a pause as Robert processed this request. "Margaret, That's a significant change. Are you sure you want to remove them from all policies? I'm absolutely certain. I want them removed from the $2.3 million whole life policy, the $850,000 accidental death policy, the $1.2 million term life policy, and all of the smaller specialized policies. That represents nearly $4.5 million in coverage, Margaret. Who would you like to designate as the new beneficiaries? I want to designate the American Cancer Society, the National Breast Cancer Foundation, and Northwestern Memorial Hospital's Oncology Research Program as the primary beneficiaries, with equal distribution among all three organizations. And you want these changes to take effect immediately? Yes, I want the beneficiary change forms processed tonight if possible, and I want confirmation that the changes are legally binding as of tomorrow morning. The second call was to my attorney in Chicago, James Harrison, who had been handling my estate planning for 15 years. James, I need to modify my will and trust arrangements immediately, I explained. I want to remove David and Karen from all inheritance provisions and redirect those assets to charitable organizations. Margaret, this is a major change. Can you tell me what's prompted this decision? I explained the pharmacy abandonment, the 11 months of exploitation during my cancer treatment, and the systematic pattern of prioritizing their financial interests over my medical support needs. They've demonstrated that their relationship with me is purely transactional, I concluded. They view my medical needs as inconvenient obligations and my assets as resources they're entitled to access. I want my estate planning to reflect the reality of their character and priorities. I understand. How would you like to restructure your estate planning? I want the bulk of my assets to go to cancer research organizations, with smaller bequests to my longtime friends and the healthcare professionals who actually provided support during my treatment. And you want these changes implemented immediately? Yes. I want new documents prepared and executed within 48 hours, with legal protections that would prevent David and Karen from challenging these decisions or claiming undue influence. The third call was to my financial advisor in Chicago, Michael Torres, who had been managing my investment portfolio for over a decade. Michael, I need to make some immediate changes to my investment accounts and beneficiary designations, I explained. What kind of changes, Margaret? I want to remove David and Karen as beneficiaries or authorized contacts on all of my investment accounts. I also want to establish charitable remainder trusts that would direct my investment assets to medical research organizations upon my death. That's a substantial change in your estate planning approach, Margaret. Can you help me understand your reasoning? I explained the systematic exploitation I had experienced during cancer treatment and their abandonment at the pharmacy that afternoon. They've proven that they view my assets as their inheritance, rather than understanding that inheritance is earned through genuine care and support, I said. I want my investment planning to reflect who actually deserves to benefit from my life's work. By 10 p.m. that evening, while David and Karen were watching television and planning their house purchase, I had initiated changes that would remove them from approximately $6.8 million in life insurance benefits, plus additional millions in investment assets and estate inheritance. The next morning, while they were getting ready for work and continuing to discuss their house purchase timeline, I received confirmation that all of my insurance beneficiary changes had been processed and were legally effective. David and Karen had no idea that their abandonment at the pharmacy had just cost them nearly $7 million in insurance benefits and inheritance assets. 3 weeks later, when David and Karen had finalized their house purchase plans and were ready to request my down payment assistance, I decided it was time to inform them about the consequences of their pharmacy abandonment. I need to have a conversation with both of you about some financial decisions I've made recently, I announced during one of our weekly family dinners. What kind of financial decisions? Karen asked, with the kind of immediate attention that financial topics always generated from them. I've made some changes to my insurance policies and estate planning arrangements, I said calmly. What kind of changes? David asked, clearly hoping this conversation would involve increased benefits for their family. I've removed both of you as beneficiaries from all of my life insurance policies, I explained matter-of-factly. The $2.3 million whole life policy, the $850,000 accidental death coverage, the term life policy, and all of the smaller policies now designate cancer research organizations as the primary beneficiaries. The silence that followed was profound as they processed what I had just told them. "You removed us from your life insurance policies?" Karen asked with shock and disbelief. "Yes. I also modified my will and trust arrangements to redirect your inheritance portions to charitable organizations that support cancer research and patient care." "Mom, why would you do that?" David asked with panic beginning to creep into his voice. "Because you abandoned me at a pharmacy after my final chemotherapy treatment to pursue your own house shopping priorities," I replied. "And because 11 months of cancer treatment revealed that your support for me was conditional, minimal, and primarily motivated by financial expectations rather than genuine care." "But Mom, we've been taking care of you throughout your entire cancer treatment," Karen protested. "No, you haven't," I corrected. "You've been charging me $1,500 monthly for housing while providing minimal actual care. You've been pressuring me to modify my insurance policies in your favor. You've been requesting substantial financial gifts to fund your personal goals. And when I needed support after my final chemotherapy session, you abandoned me to pursue a house showing for a property you expected me to fund." "That was just one afternoon," David said desperately. "You can't judge our entire year of support based on one scheduling conflict." "It wasn't a scheduling conflict," I replied firmly. "It was a demonstration of your true priorities. When your personal convenience conflicted with my medical support needs, you chose your convenience without hesitation or remorse. And it wasn't one isolated incident," I continued. "It was the culmination of 11 months of systematic exploitation disguised as family caregiving." Karen's response revealed the extent to which they had been counting on my insurance benefits and inheritance for their financial planning. "Margaret, you can't just remove us from your insurance policies because of one misunderstanding," she said with increasing desperation. "We've built our entire future planning around the expectation that we would be your beneficiaries." "That was your mistake," I replied. "Insurance benefits and inheritance are not entitlements that family members can assume or demand. They're gifts that are earned through genuine care and support." "But Mom, we love you," David pleaded. "We've been trying to help you through cancer treatment while managing our own lives and responsibilities." "David, love isn't demonstrated through paid caregiving services, insurance beneficiary pressure, and abandonment during medical appointments," I said calmly. "Love is demonstrated through prioritizing someone's well-being over your own convenience, providing support without conditions or expectations, and being present during their most vulnerable moments. You've proven that your relationship with me is transactional rather than loving. You've shown that you view my medical needs as inconvenient obligations and my assets as resources you're entitled to access." The conversation continued for over an hour, with David and Karen alternating between denial, anger, bargaining, and desperation as they realized the full extent of what they had lost through their exploitation and abandonment. "Mom, please reconsider these changes," David begged. "We're willing to apologize for any mistakes we made and do better going forward." "The time for doing better was during my cancer treatment," I replied. "You had 11 months to demonstrate genuine care and support. Instead, you demonstrated selfishness, exploitation, and abandonment." "But Margaret, changing your insurance policies so drastically seems like an overreaction," Karen argued. "Surely we can work out some kind of compromise that recognizes both our mistakes and our genuine efforts to help." "There is no compromise," I said firmly. "You've shown me who you really are when someone you claim to love needs support during a medical crisis. My insurance policies and estate planning now reflect that reality." Over the following weeks, David and Karen made numerous attempts to convince me to reverse my insurance and estate planning changes, using every manipulation tactic they had, employed during my cancer treatment. They tried guilt. "Mom, we're your only family. Who else are you going to leave your assets to?" They tried bargaining. "What if we provide better support going forward? Can we earn back our beneficiary status?" They tried emotional manipulation. "You're punishing us for trying to balance helping you with managing our own lives and responsibilities." They tried financial pressure. "Without your support, we can't afford the house we wanted to buy. You're destroying our dreams and future plans." But I had learned during my cancer treatment that manipulation tactics only work when the target feels vulnerable, dependent, or guilty. I no longer felt any of those things. My cancer treatment had been successful. My health was returning to normal. I was no longer dependent on their minimal and conditional support. And I felt no guilt about protecting my assets from people who had proven they would exploit my medical vulnerability for personal gain. "My insurance and estate planning decisions are final," I told them during our last conversation about these changes. "They reflect the reality of your character and priorities, as demonstrated during my cancer treatment." 6 months after the pharmacy abandonment, I moved back to my Chicago townhouse and resumed my independent life with excellent health, strong social connections, and complete control over my financial affairs. David and Karen's attempts to maintain contact gradually decreased as they realized that my insurance policy changes were permanent and that I was no longer a source of financial support or inheritance expectations. My cancer treatment had ended successfully, with no evidence of disease, and an excellent prognosis for long-term health. But more importantly, the cancer experience had taught me invaluable lessons about family relationships, financial boundaries, and the difference between genuine care and exploitative manipulation. The American Cancer Society, National Breast Cancer Foundation, and Northwestern Memorial Hospital's Oncology Research Program were informed that they would be receiving substantial insurance benefits that would fund cancer research and patient support programs for years to come. My longtime friends in Chicago welcomed me back with genuine warmth and support that contrasted sharply with the conditional, transactional relationship I had experienced with David and Karen. Dr. Martinez, my original oncologist in Chicago, was delighted to learn about my successful treatment completion and excellent recovery. "Margaret, you look wonderful," she said, during my first follow-up appointment. "How was the family support experience in Phoenix?" "It was educational," I replied. "I learned a lot about the difference between genuine family support and financial exploitation disguised as caregiving." "I'm sorry to hear that your family situation was challenging during treatment," she said with genuine concern. "Actually, I'm grateful for the education," I told her. Cancer treatment revealed their true character and priorities, which allowed me to make informed decisions about my insurance policies and estate planning. Sometimes difficult experiences provide valuable clarity about relationships and priorities. 1 year after the pharmacy abandonment, I reflected on the lessons learned during my cancer treatment experience and the insurance policy changes that had resulted from David and Karen's exploitation and abandonment. The most important lesson was about the difference between conditional and unconditional family support. Genuine family care is provided without expectation of financial return, without resentment of inconvenience, and without abandonment when personal priorities conflict with medical needs. David and Karen had provided conditional support that was dependent on my gratitude, financial generosity, and willingness to accommodate their schedules and priorities. When I needed support most, they prioritized their own convenience and financial goals. The second lesson was about the importance of financial boundaries during medical vulnerability. Serious illness can create opportunities for exploitation by family members who view medical crises as leverage for financial benefits. My insurance expertise had allowed me to recognize and counter their exploitation. But many people facing medical crises might not have the knowledge or resources to protect themselves from similar manipulation. The third lesson was about the power of insurance policies and estate planning as tools for accountability and justice. By modifying my beneficiary designations and inheritance arrangements, I was able to ensure that my assets would benefit organizations that actually support cancer patients, rather than people who had exploited my medical vulnerability. The cancer research organizations that now benefit from my insurance policies and estate planning provide genuine support to patients facing medical crises without conditions, expectations, or abandonment. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to establish boundaries, demand respect, and redirect resources toward people and organizations that deserve them. My cancer treatment experience had cost David and Karen nearly $7 million in insurance benefits and inheritance assets, a price that accurately reflected the value of their exploitation and abandonment during my medical crisis. Today, at 75 years old, I am healthy, independent, and surrounded by people who provide genuine care and support without conditions or expectations. My insurance policies and estate planning reflect my values and priorities, rather than the manipulative demands of family members who proved they couldn't be trusted during my most vulnerable period. The pharmacy abandonment that seemed like a small betrayal at the time proved to be the most expensive 45 minutes of David and Karen's lives. Their decision to prioritize house shopping over supporting me after my final chemotherapy treatment cost them more money than most people earn in a lifetime. Sometimes the coldest abandonment leads to the warmest appreciation for people and organizations that provide genuine care without conditions. If you're watching this story and recognizing similar patterns in your own family relationships during medical crises, I want you to know that you have more power than you might realize. Medical vulnerability doesn't mean you have to accept exploitation, abandonment, or conditional support from family members who view your crisis as an opportunity for personal gain. You have the right to expect genuine care without financial conditions or expectations. You have the right to modify insurance beneficiaries and estate planning arrangements based on how family members actually treat you during difficult times. You have the right to redirect your assets toward people and organizations that provide real support without abandonment or exploitation. And you have the right to hold family members accountable for their treatment of you during medical crises, including through financial consequences that reflect the cost of their betrayal. Trust me when I tell you that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is allow people to experience the financial consequences of their abandonment and exploitation. The SIT, frozen insurance accounts I created that February evening weren't punishment. They were education about the cost of abandoning family members during medical emergencies. What would you have done if your family abandoned you at a pharmacy during cancer treatment? Have you ever been exploited by family members who expected financial benefits for minimal medical support? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know if this story has inspired you to examine your own insurance beneficiaries and estate planning arrangements. And if you found this story of reclaiming power and demanding respect during medical vulnerability resonating with you, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories of people who chose themselves when others wouldn't choose them. Sometimes the coldest pharmacy abandonment can lead to the warmest appreciation for organizations that actually care about cancer patients, and the most expensive education about the cost of exploiting someone's medical vulnerability for personal gain. 2 years have passed since that February afternoon when David and Karen abandoned me at CVS Pharmacy, and the ripple effects of their decision continue to provide both satisfaction and valuable life lessons that I want to share with everyone watching this story. The most immediate consequence was watching David and Karen's carefully constructed life plans crumble when they realized the full extent of what their pharmacy abandonment had cost them. The house they had been so eager to see that afternoon, the one they prioritized over my final chemotherapy support, remained permanently out of reach once they understood that my $75,000 down payment assistance was no longer available. Mom, we need to talk about the house situation. David called me 3 weeks after our insurance policy conversation, his voice carrying a desperation I had never heard before. The seller is ready to accept our offer, but we need to secure the down payment funding by Friday, or we'll lose the opportunity. I'm sure you'll figure out an alternative financing solution, I replied calmly. Banks offer various mortgage programs for qualified buyers. But Mom, without your help, we don't qualify for the loan amount we need, Karen added, having picked up the extension phone. Our debt-to-income ratio is too high because of the monthly payments we were making during your cancer treatment. The irony was perfect. The $1,500 monthly cost-sharing payments they had charged me for cancer support had actually damaged their credit profile and loan eligibility, making it impossible for them to qualify for the mortgage they had assumed I would fund. Perhaps you should consider a more affordable house that fits your actual income, I suggested. Many families find happiness in homes that match their real financial capabilities. Margaret, you're destroying our dreams out of spite, Karen said with the kind of anger that revealed her true character. We made one mistake, and you're punishing us forever. One mistake? I repeated with genuine surprise. Karen, you spent 11 months charging me rent for cancer support, pressuring me for insurance beneficiary changes, and systematically reducing your caregiving while increasing your financial demands. The pharmacy abandonment wasn't one mistake. It was the final demonstration of a pattern that had been developing throughout my entire treatment. But we apologized for that afternoon, David protested. We were willing to admit we made poor judgment and do better going forward. David, you didn't apologize until you discovered the insurance policy consequences, I corrected. Your immediate reaction to abandoning me was satisfaction that I had managed independently, followed by excitement about your house shopping success. Apologies that only come after discovering financial consequences aren't genuine remorse, they're damage control. The house purchase fell through, and David and Karen were forced to remain in their original home while grappling with the reality that their long-term financial planning had been based on assumptions about my insurance policies and inheritance that were no longer valid. 6 months later, I learned through mutual acquaintances that their marriage was experiencing significant stress as they blamed each other for the decisions that had cost them nearly $7 million in expected inheritance and insurance benefits. I heard from Jennifer Martinez at the hospital that David and Karen are having marital problems, my friend Susan mentioned during one of our weekly lunches in Chicago. Apparently, they're arguing constantly about money and about whose fault it was that you changed your insurance policies. That's unfortunate, I replied, though I felt no responsibility for the consequences of their choices. Marriage stress often reveals underlying character issues that were previously hidden or ignored. Jennifer said Karen blames David for being too aggressive about asking for financial support, and David blames Karen for not providing better medical care that would have kept you grateful and generous. The fact that they were blaming each other rather than taking responsibility for their joint exploitation revealed that neither of them understood the fundamental problem with their approach to my cancer treatment. They were still focused on strategy and tactics rather than recognizing that their entire mindset had been selfish and manipulative. A year after my insurance policy changes, I received a certified letter from David and Karen that demonstrated they still didn't understand the difference between genuine remorse and continued manipulation. Dear Margaret, the letter began, we have been reflecting on our relationship during your cancer treatment, and we want to acknowledge that we made serious mistakes in how we supported you during that difficult time. The letter continued for 3 pages, carefully crafted to sound like genuine accountability, while actually being a sophisticated attempt to convince me to reverse my insurance and estate planning decisions. We realize now that we were overwhelmed by the responsibilities of caregiving and made poor decisions that prioritized our own stress and convenience over your needs, they wrote. We want you to know that we have learned from these mistakes and are committed to being better family members going forward. We hope that you will consider giving us an opportunity to demonstrate our growth and renewed commitment to putting family relationships above personal interests. The letter concluded with a request for a family reconciliation meeting, where we could work together to rebuild trust and restore the loving relationship that cancer treatment unfortunately damaged. I showed the letter to my attorney, James Harrison, who had seen similar attempts at inheritance manipulation throughout his career. Margaret, this is a textbook example of what estate planning attorneys call inheritance rehabilitation, he explained. When people realize they've been removed from wills and insurance policies, they often attempt to demonstrate changed behavior in hopes of being reinstated as beneficiaries. Do you think their remorse is genuine? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. The timing suggests otherwise, James replied diplomatically. Genuine remorse typically comes immediately after harmful behavior, driven by recognition of the hurt caused to others. Remorse that emerges only after discovering financial consequences tends to be strategic rather than authentic. I declined their request for a reconciliation meeting, explaining in a brief written response that insurance and estate planning decisions based on demonstrated character and behavior patterns are not subject to negotiation or reversal based on subsequent promises of improvement. Actions during times of crisis and vulnerability reveal true character, I wrote. Your behavior during my cancer treatment provided clear information about your priorities and values. That information has been permanently incorporated into my financial planning decisions. The most satisfying aspect of the entire situation has been watching the charitable organizations that now benefit from my insurance policies and estate. Planning put those resources to meaningful use supporting actual cancer patients. The American Cancer Society used a portion of my advance charitable contribution to fund a patient transportation program that provides free rides to chemotherapy appointments for cancer patients who lack family support or transportation resources. Margaret, your contribution is directly helping cancer patients who are in situations similar to what you experienced, said Linda Rodriguez, the program coordinator. Many of our patients are elderly or don't have family members who can provide consistent transportation support. How many patients does the program serve? I asked during my visit to see the program in operation. We're currently providing transportation for about 200 cancer patients monthly, Linda replied. Your contribution will allow us to expand the program to serve an additional 100 patients who are currently on our waiting list. Watching cancer patients receive reliable, compassionate transportation support, exactly what David and Karen had been unwilling to provide consistently, gave me more satisfaction than any inheritance could have provided them. The National Breast Cancer Foundation used their designated portion of my estate planning to fund a support program for cancer patients whose families charge them for caregiving, or who experience financial exploitation during treatment. Unfortunately, your experience with family exploitation during cancer treatment is more common than most people realize, explained Dr. Patricia Williams, the program director. Many cancer patients face financial pressure from family members who view medical crises as opportunities for personal gain. What kind of support does the program provide? I asked. We provide emergency financial assistance for patients who are being charged by family members for housing or care during treatment, Dr. Williams explained. We also offer counseling and legal resources for patients who are experiencing financial manipulation or inheritance pressure during their medical treatment. Learning that other cancer patients had experienced similar exploitation validated my decision to redirect my assets toward organizations that provide genuine support without conditions or expectations. Northwestern Memorial Hospital's oncology research program used their portion of my contribution to fund a study on family dynamics during cancer treatment, examining how family stress and financial pressure affect patient recovery outcomes. Your experience highlights an important but under-researched area of cancer care, Dr. Martinez explained when I visited the research program. we're studying how family relationship quality affects treatment compliance, recovery outcomes, and long-term survival rates. What have you learned so far? I asked. Preliminary data suggests that cancer patients who receive genuine, unconditional family support have better treatment outcomes and faster recovery than patients who experience family stress, financial pressure, or conditional support, she replied. We're also finding that cancer patients who are forced to pay family members for care or who experience inheritance pressure during treatment show increased stress markers that can negatively affect immune system function and treatment effectiveness. The research program was essentially validating what I had experienced personally, that exploitative family relationships during medical crises cause additional stress that can interfere with healing and recovery. Perhaps the most meaningful outcome of my insurance policy changes has been the personal freedom and peace of mind that comes from having financial arrangements that reflect my values and priorities rather than family manipulation and pressure. I no longer receive phone calls from David and Karen requesting financial assistance for their personal goals. I no longer worry about family members viewing my medical needs as inconvenient obligations. I no longer feel pressure to modify my estate, planning to accommodate family members who have proven they prioritize their own interests over my well-being. You seem much more relaxed and happy than you did during your cancer treatment period, my friend Margaret observed during one of our bridge games. Is it because your health has improved, or because your family situation has changed? It's both, I replied honestly. Good health is wonderful, but having family relationships that aren't based on financial expectations and manipulation is equally important for overall well-being. Do you ever regret changing your insurance policy so drastically? She asked. Never, I said without hesitation. Cancer treatment revealed their true character and priorities. My insurance policies now reflect that reality rather than my previous hopes about who they might become. The final lesson I want to share with everyone watching this story is about the importance of making financial decisions based on how people actually treat you rather than how you hope they will treat you or how they promise to treat you in the future. Family members who genuinely care about you will provide support during medical crises without charging rent, pressuring for inheritance benefits, or abandoning you when their convenience conflicts with your needs. Family members who view you primarily as a financial resource will exploit your medical vulnerability, charge for minimal support, and prioritize their own goals over your well-being, regardless of how much you love them or hope for better treatment. Insurance policies and estate planning are powerful tools for holding family members accountable for their treatment of you during your most vulnerable periods. Use those tools to reward genuine care and protect yourself from exploitation. Don't let guilt, manipulation, or family pressure convince you to maintain financial arrangements that benefit people who have proven they don't deserve those benefits through their actions rather than their words. My cancer treatment was successfully completed with excellent long-term prognosis. But more importantly, it provided invaluable education about family relationships and financial boundaries that has improved every aspect of my life. David and Karen's decision to abandon me at a pharmacy for 45 minutes cost them $7 million in insurance benefits and inheritance, proving that sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that people teach themselves through their own poor choices. The cancer research organizations that now benefit from my policies are providing genuine support to patients who actually need it, without conditions, charges, or abandonment. Sometimes, the coldest family betrayal leads to the warmest appreciation for organizations and people who provide real care without expecting anything in return. If this story has inspired you to examine your own insurance beneficiaries and estate planning arrangements, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself when others won't choose you. Trust me when I tell you that protecting your assets from family exploitation isn't selfish. It's smart planning that ensures your resources benefit people and organizations that actually deserve them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.